Welcome, everybody, to session 3 of our series. Session 3 is called From Chaos to Clarity, Demystifying Fuel Logistics. So welcome, everybody. We appreciate you joining. My name is Paul Lowinger, and I'm the Vice President of Solutions Consulting for Titan Cloud. And I've been working with clients and prospects for over 25 years, really understanding what they're trying to do strategically, what's inhibiting these companies from achieving their strategic goals. Can technology play a role in addressing those challenges? And what's the value? I'd like to introduce Wade Lowe, our co-founder and president of TrueFill, which is a recent acquisition of Titan Cloud.
Thanks, Paul. Excited to be here. Good to connect with everybody. As Paul had mentioned, the previous co-founder and president of TrueFill, and we are now part of the Titan Cloud family and part of their product and suite of services. Excited to be part of that as well. My background primarily has been in the entrepreneurial arena for the better part of the last 15 years, specifically as it relates to building software and technology to be able to solve customer problems in the last 8 years, very specifically in the downstream fuel space. So excited to share what we have with you today. Looking forward to the back half of the conversation more candidly, because that's when we get the feedback and get to engage with everybody. So we'll make the front half of it as efficient and as quick as possible, and then we'll get into the back half where we can engage with everybody who's participating.
Very good. Thanks, Wade.
Yep.
And so this is a series that we've been running. There's 3 parts. The series is called The Future of Filling Up Faster, Easier, and Frictionless. And session 1 was all around eliminating the pain points at the pump for your customers. So things like really managing flow rates and maximizing flow rates, minimizing downtime of your equipment like nozzles and tanks. Session 2 was all around inventory variance. So do you have variance, and what are the root causes of variance, and how can Titan Cloud help to minimize variance? And then session 3 is all around demystifying fuel logistics. So Titan Cloud, we've been around since 2012, and we serve over 85,000 sites across various markets. So these markets are all around enterprise C-stores, small and medium-sized C-stores, and then international companies. But certainly fleet, really helping manage compliance and everything around supply management and logistics management for these fleet companies, and as well as equipment and service providers. We have over 50% market share in the US and over 700 customers globally. And so when we think about Titan Cloud at the highest level, we enable connectivity, visibility, and control to all of your fuel assets and operations. And so operations around fuel, so we already talked about a few of them, around managing things that impact your customer satisfaction, flow rate, nozzle down, tank shutdown, also inventory variance and the root cause of variance. Operations around compliance, so really managing all of your documents and doing site inspection and testing and permitting, and then also everything around alarm management and release detection. From an operations perspective related to maintenance, it's everything around creating work orders and then dispatching technicians to work on those work orders, and then managing all assets and equipment within our platform, as well as managing POs. And then finally, around supply and logistics management, that's why we're all here today. So I will turn this over to Wade to go into detail.
Thanks, Paul. So I will speak specifically and talk through specifically what was previously the TrueFill platform, which is now the Titan Cloud supply and logistics solution. We've been in the downstream fuel space between myself and Brandon Huff, my partner, who now has a senior leadership role inside of Titan as well, and is actually at a board meeting today, which is why he's not in attendance. But we think specifically about downstream, as you guys do as well, from terminal to end destination. That's where we play. Like how to help companies manage their supply, including their buy, and the logistics of getting fuel purchased, getting it picked up, getting it transported, getting it delivered, and getting it reconciled. And you would think that wouldn't be that complicated of a process, but as we all know, it is an incredibly complicated process. So that is why we built a platform to be able to manage that. So what you're looking at on this slide specifically are the areas where the software plays and the 4 specific modules, because it's a modular system. It's not all or nothing. You do not have to use all of it or none of it. You can use whatever part of it is required for your business. And so in this particular case, for the way it's built, there's 4 distinct modules. There's the supply management module, which includes managing contracts and allocation, managing pricing associated with those contracts and allocation, and best buy. So not only can you manage all the contracts that you have with the different suppliers and the contracts if you're reselling the fuel with your customers and your buyers, but the system can also automatically make recommendations on what is the best option for you today based off of what your contracts are and your allocation is, and a variety of different other components that go into that algorithm. The next step in the process, obviously, is you're going to decide, well, where am I going to buy and what am I going to buy? But then you want to determine, well, where am I, what sites need product? So we have a very robust forecasting and inventory management system that will tell the dispatchers or other parties that are involved in that process, if it's maybe third-party carriers, when it's a carrier managed component, the system will tell you, here's what needs to go, what load needs to go, how much of each product needs to go, what truck, tractor, trailer combination, and what site needs to go, and then what time does it need to be there so that you don't have a retain and you don't have a run out. Everything's predicated on retains and runouts. So we're looking at the inventory levels. We're seeing what's happening inside the tanks. We're looking at consumption rates. We're looking at historicals, and then we're providing very accurate recommendations on what loads need to go when. The next component is the dispatch and logistics component. On this component, this is you can include forecasting in this or not. And this is the workbench. This is where the dispatchers are going to build the loads. They're going to assign the loads. They're going to build their driver schedules. They're going to assign loads to carriers using third-party haulers. There's the ability to be able to track real-time the load progress based off what the driver's doing in the app. There's the ability for the carriers, the third-party haulers, to connect into the system so you can get real-time visibility and be able to communicate with them back and forth and get out of email. So that's the workbench area of the system. And then the final component is the exception management and the reconciliation. And that is really taking what was supposed to happen, what actually happened. Can we reconcile these things? Is it accurate? Is it not? If it's accurate, great. Push the clean transaction through to the back office, because we'll integrate with any back office. If it's not clean, hold it as an exception and have somebody take a look at it. And we'll walk through some of these in more detail here in a minute. So as we get into the primary component of what people are trying to solve for, at the end of the day, especially in this particular industry and space right now, everyone's trying to maximize profits. That is the end game right now. So the way we want to do that is you combine the fuel supply, and then with the supply team that's determining what's my best buy, what's my option for my supply team today, the operations team, which is responsible for actually executing on the strategy and getting the fuel delivered where it needs to go, and then there's the back office. And really those 3 different components inside of a business typically work in silos and are not always working together. And you have to use different systems for each one of those. So what we've done is we brought all that together so that you can have your supply team, your operations team, and your back office team all in one place, managing the let's call it the operation, the logistics of the fuel supply and delivery, and you don't have to have disparate systems and different people in different places trying to figure out what's going on. So that's the primary goal around that is to maximize the profit for the business. So the first module we'll talk through, which I highlighted a little bit earlier before, was on supply management. Inside of supply management, you can set up the buy side and sell side contracts if you're reselling the fuel. If you're not reselling the fuel, If you're a retailer and you're selling to the consumer, you're not going to have buy-side contracts. If you're a wholesaler or you're a jobber or you're another party like that, you will have sell-side contracts as well. There's a best buy component, which is going to make the recommendations on where do we want to pull from today? What is my best, not only best price, but also include allocation. And then and then the system's going to make recommendations on what we want to do. Then you manage your allocations. This is a big deal. Like, how do you manage allocations? How do you know how much you have left on your contract? And how do you know if you've got allocation at the terminal you're about to send a driver to or a third-party hauler to? Because if you start pulling down too hard off those contracts, as you know, then you're sending people to terminals that don't have product and they can't get it. And that creates all kinds of havoc and chaos. And then there's the off-contract spot buying. We can help you guys manage spot buying as well. And the challenges that most people are trying to solve for is there's a disconnect between supply and logistics teams, right? And there's too much data. There's too much information to be able to do it manually, accurately every single time. So we've applied technology to be able to say, let us help you make those decisions. We won't hard code them in. You can always edit them and change them, but the system will make very accurate recommendations on what we think you should be doing. And then the key capabilities really are around just letting the system drive automation through the workflow so that you don't have so many manual touch points along the way. To Paul's point, the question around, do you have difficulty accurately forecasting based on inventory levels and patterns? And what we do is we're able to take the inventory levels and the consumption rates that are running through the tanks. We can see both what the inventory levels are historically, because we can pull basically every 15 minutes. And we can also look at sales data. That was a big part of the component of us being part of Titan Cloud, is we have a variety of different ways to be able to see what's happening at the site. And then instead of dispatchers having to decide, and you'll hear a common theme around this, around automation, automate. We're not suggesting that people don't need to be involved. What we are suggesting is that technology can help people make better decisions. And so as we're looking at the inventory levels and the consumption rates, the system is predicting what needs to go and where it needs to go and when it needs to go and how much needs to go. And it'll actually build loads for you so that the dispatcher just has to dispatch them instead of having to go in and determine what sites are in need of product at what time. The system's doing that for you and allowing the dispatcher to be able to focus on other things versus trying to figure out what sites are about to run out or not, because the system's handling that. We'll look out 7 days in advance. Primarily, we can look out further, but typically that's not necessary. So when you're looking at building schedules, 7 days in advance is plenty of time. And then we're going to automate that base and optimize that ETA so that you don't have a retain and you don't have a run out, and the dispatcher knows what's happening. The screen below actually shows the visibility of the tank. So you can see the tanks real time, anytime, and it'll give you the historicals. And that's how it's making the predictions on what should be done. So the next component we're going to talk about is the actual dispatch and logistics. This is as we talked before, this is the workbench area of the system, where at the end of the day, you've got supply management, you've got forecasting, you've got reconciliation, but dispatch is really where everything comes together. So we take the data from supply management, we take the data from forecasting, we'll take the data from the ERP, and this becomes the area where all of these points merge and converge, and we leverage that data information to make it easier for companies to be able to manage the logistics, i.e. the dispatching of actually getting the loads to where they need to go, and and that could be with your own drivers, or that could be with third-party haulers. It doesn't matter. The experience is the same for the teams that are using the system. When the system is building and forecasting loads, you can send those to your own trucks and drivers, or you can send them out to third-party haulers, and it doesn't really matter to us. We just want to give a unified experience. And there's what we have found, our experience has been that companies that have mixed fleets between, whether it's short truck, transport, third parties, whatever the case may be, there's different systems that do a little bit different or better job for one versus the other. And we brought it all together and said, look, we don't care if you're using short trucks. We don't care if you're using third parties. We don't care if you're using transport. It's all going to be a unified experience for you. And it's going to make it very easy for you to be able to manage your business. And then the objective here is to be able to, again, reduce your cost and increase your profitability, because you can improve the truck utilization. And in theory, you should be able to drive costs out of the business. And we've seen that when companies leverage us, they drive costs out of the business because they're just doing it more efficiently and they have one system to be able to manage everything in. Paul, am I missing anything here so far?
Yeah, so one of the poll questions is, do you experience higher operating costs due to reactive or over allocation situations? And so, it's really at the point when you dispatch, do you have full visibility to those allocations and where you do have an over allocated situation? The answers that are coming back, it's about 56% that say sometimes, 44% say rarely. So we've got a mix here. But Wade, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on what's been interesting about being in the space for a little while now is that although it would seem that most companies' workflows would be the same because you're doing the same job for all intents and purposes, they're actually not, right? And so 80% of that workflow is the same. And you can tell by the answers to the poll question, but 20% of it's different. And it's not different in the same way. It's different in a unique way every single time. And I think you're seeing some of that as a result of the answers to the poll questions, because some companies are doing it one way and they've got everything dialed in for a certain part of the business, but they may not for another part of the business. And that's another reason we built the system to be modular, because some companies may be struggling with the BOL and the reconciliation. Some companies may be struggling with the supply management. They think they got dispatch under control, or they're great on supply, but man, the dispatch system that we're currently using isn't great. It's not ideal. It's legacy. It hasn't been upgraded in a long time. And that's the problem there. So you start to see that based off the different systems that people have to use for their business and their workflows, even though the workflow is, hey, I need to buy, I need to move, and I need to deliver, I need to reconcile. It's still very unique inside of each business on how they actually operate. So on to the final component, the final module that we work through, and I think there is a tremendous amount of value here as it relates to helping companies really offset a lot of their let's call it their exceptions and the errors that happen in the business, because there's so much manual component to all of this, because there's so many systems and there's so many different groups and so many different people involved in like one fuel transaction, that it can create a lot of havoc post delivery, and then a lot of work for the accounting teams or the logistics teams, whoever's responsible for ensuring that what we wanted to have happen, i.e. what did the supply team want to happen today? What did the dispatch team want to happen today? What actually happened at the terminal via the driver or via the carrier? What happened at the site? Meaning, did it get delivered to the right place in the right tank at the right time? And then pulling all that back together and pushing that into an accounting system. What we've found is that a lot of companies actually have to touch, literally somebody has to look at every transaction before it gets pushed into the back office, because there's a very good percentage, a very large percent or meaningful percentage of the transactions are not clean. They're not exactly what they thought they were going to be. Maybe the product got delivered to the wrong place. Maybe the product only 50% of the fuel got delivered, because the other 50%, there was a retain needed to be taken somewhere else. Maybe it wasn't on time. Maybe there was some type of breakdown on the truck. Maybe the wrong product got pulled at the terminal. So the load codes that were entered in and the product that was pulled doesn't match what the supply team had wanted. And now your pricing's all different. And is it right or is it not? So there's a variety of things that can go wrong, as you guys all know, every day inside of a fuel transaction. So we built a very robust exception management service that says, look, we have all the data. We know what supply wanted to do. We know what the forecasting was. We know what sites are supposed to take. We know what the dispatcher scheduled. We know what truck he put it on. We know what carrier he sent it to. We know what driver's taking it. We know where he was when he got to the terminal. We know what happened at the terminal because we have the BOL information, and we have the if we're getting EBOLs, we have the EBOL, so we can reconcile against that. We also geofence the terminals and the location, so we know if they're at the right place. We know where he is on his route to get to the actual delivery point. We know what happened to the delivery point because we can see the tank levels in the monitors, and they're raising or not based on whether or not there was fuel taken. So we have all this information. So we say, look, if we have it and we recognize that all of this is correct, we're passing it through as a clean transaction into the accounting system. If it is not correct, we're flagging it and somebody has to look at it. But it's better to look at, 12% of the transactions than 100% of the transactions. And then if there is something that needs to be adjusted, you can adjust it in the system, and then it can get pushed in, and that keeps bad data out of the accounting system. I think we all know what a hornet's nest it is. When you're pushing bad data into your accounting system, it creates all kinds of havoc and problems. So we extract all that out. We handle it up front. If there's a problem, we're going to catch it. If not, it's going into the accounting system. So it seems like that's something that the group here has certainly some experience with as it relates to reconciling the BOLs and managing the tax component. It's about 44% of the poll said, yeah, that's a problem. 2 are like, nope, we got it under control. And kudos, look, if you've got this under control, good for you. You're ahead of the game, right? Because most companies we work with do not do this very well. And it's not a knock on them. It's just hard. It's really hard. And then some others that are not sure. Paul, am I missing anything here?
No. So the question is, do you find it difficult reconciling BOLs and managing taxes as a result of a manual error-prone process when we're talking about this exception management reconciliation?
Yep. Cool. Thanks. A couple more slides to go. We'll talk through the what Titan Cloud combined with TrueFill is able to do. And the reality is what we're trying to do, and I don't say we're not trying, I'd argue we are doing, is reducing system complexity, right? Because you can use one system for all these different parts of the business. Whereas right now, I would be hard pressed to believe that there's anybody who can handle all parts of the workflow as well as we can. And most of the companies that we talk to and we work with are using multiple systems for different parts of the workflow. We want to really reduce, we just spent a bunch of time on this, reduce the touch points. There's so many touch points that happen in a fuel transaction that it creates a lot of opportunity for error. So how do we reduce the amount of errors that happen to be A, make it more efficient internally, and B, make it better for your customers, right? If you're reselling the fuel and there's a lot of errors going on, your customers get very unhappy when that happens. We can significantly reduce DSO. That in 2020 didn't really matter as much because money was free, right? Interest rates were like 0. So who cares? The money's free. But in a high interest rate environment like we have today, when your DSO starts to really expand, that's a huge problem. It creates a lot of cash crunch on the business, and we can help a lot there. We certainly reduce runouts. We've got a lot of data to suggest that if people aren't using forecasting and they turn our forecasting engine on, that their runout rate comes down significantly. Obviously, we can reduce the fuel supply costs, which also include, it takes into consideration freight, distance, terminal, pricing, contracts, all the different components that you would need to know, like how much is this load going to cost me in aggregate? Not just the fuel price, that's part of it. The contract is part of it, but it's actually what's the aggregated cost of this load when you look at the distance between the price of the fuel, the distance that you have to go to pick it up, the distance you have to go to drop it off, what are your hauling rates, what's the fuel cost, what's my allocation, all that come together. We found that we can typically reduce the actual cost of the load by a meaningful amount of money. And then we can reduce the freight cost because we've got a route optimization component as well. We can really help optimize how efficiently you're utilizing your assets if you've got your own trucks, and typically drive down the costs of not only the freight, but the actual hard costs on how much time it's taking you to go do the deliveries and what assets and people are you using. From an improvement standpoint, we'll make better demand and decision making, because obviously we're like a co-pilot, right? We're not saying you shouldn't have people involved. We're just saying, here's a good co-pilot to help you make decisions. You can make them more quickly, you can make better buy decisions. You automate a lot of the things that have to be done manually today. God forbid you have like really good people who go out on leave for some particular reason, and like, okay, now what? Like, our brain trust is out of the office, and what are we supposed to do, and how do we operate? That's a huge problem, right? And if you've got technology to help with that, it makes things more efficient. We do carrier scorecarding as well. So if you're using third-party haulers and you want to very quickly and easily determine like, how are my carriers performing, we can provide you that data. And then the goal here is that we can manage more sites with fewer resources, because it doesn't require as many people to do as much work, because the system is helping automate a lot of the workflow. And then at the end of the day, we've got a lot of different customers. One customer in particular that allows us to publicly talk about our relationship with them, and they have been a phenomenal customer for us. They were instrumental in helping us build a lot of this functionality that we have today and helping drive automate. It was good for us, so the company's Parkland, specifically Parkland US. We work in Parkland, Canada as well. But because they use carriers, because they have short truck, because they have transport, because they resell fuel, because they do marine, like they do everything. And in order for us to be able to service that business, we had to do everything. And because they grew so quickly through acquisition, there was a lot of problems with the workflow. So we were able to help solve that problem. And you guys could read through this at a different time, but I'll give you the highlights. You got thousands of locations that are taking deliveries. They've got different systems that they inherited through acquisitions that they had made. So there was no standardized way by which they operated. So they standardized the way they operate. Everything runs through TrueFill. And then they were always, and this is the case for a lot of companies, is they're reactively looking at performance versus being able to real time and then proactively predict how performance is going to go. So we were able to help them get away from looking at things in hindsight and looking at things forward facing to determine how well is the business going to perform versus, hey, how did we do 30 days ago? And then the solutions that they're using that we just talked through: supply management, forecasting, dispatch, reconciliation. They leverage our APIs for analytics. They grab, so we publish APIs so that people can grab their data and run it through any BI tool that they choose versus us creating reports. So we're very, very easy to work with as it relates to getting because it's your data. It's not our data, it's your data. You want it, you can have it. We're not trying to hide it from you. So we publish APIs for people to be able to connect to. And then the results have been the DSO shrunk dramatically, which helped the cash impact on the business. And then they implement what's called a Parkland way, which is how Parkland standardized how all the regions are to operate and how they're supposed to manage the buy and the logistics of the fuel. And they standardize how that happened across the entire country. And it's driven a tremendous impact to their business, specifically on the bottom line. So with that, right on time. I get a gold badge for that.
You do.
We'll get into the questions.
So we've got the first question is, please remind me, what is DSO? So that stands for Days Sales Outstanding.
Yeah, so if you're reselling the fuel, and it's basically telling you how healthy you are in regards to collecting the money. And the idea is the faster you collect, the less you require to draw down on your lines of credit, which obviously if you're drawing down your lines of credit, you're paying the interest on that, and you got to build that into the price of the fuel. So the faster that you can get the invoices, if you're reselling the fuel, the faster you can get those invoices out, the faster you can get paid, the smaller your DSO, and the less cost you're incurring from a finance perspective to be able to manage the cash flow of the business.
Well, the next question is allocation management integrated with contracts and dispatching?
Yeah, great question. So the short answer is yes and no. It's modular. So the allocation is absolutely integrated with contracts. And then dispatching, if you're using supply management, you get allocation management. if you're using supply management and not dispatch, because you have a dispatch system that you're already using, maybe you're under contract for the next 4 years and you can't get out of it, or whatever the case may be, you can still use it, but the dispatch team will be, they can get into it, but it won't be talking to each other because you'll be using a different system for dispatch than you are for supply management. But if you're using supply management, absolutely allocation and contracts are bundled together inside of supply management. And then if you're using both, if you're using supply management and dispatch, then it's all pulled together into one place, and the data flow, the data information flows seamlessly. Like you wouldn't even know that it's two modules. To you, it's all one. So you can't tell the difference.
Okay, very good. Can your solution manage a mixed fleet of transport and short trucks?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the things that we had to do very early on, which I think is different than a lot of systems out there. Look, there's other systems out there. I'm not, we're obviously, everybody understands the market, and there's never one, you're never in a market by yourself, us included. But there are some companies that are pretty good at transport, and there's some companies that are pretty good at short truck. But some of the ones that are good at transport don't do short truck at all. And some of the ones that are good at, bobtails and short trucks don't do transport. And we do both. And not only do we both, we also do third-party haulers incredibly gracefully and well. So I would expand on that. The answer to the question is yes, we do transport. Yes, we do short truck or bobtails, whatever you want to call them. And then yes, we also can do help manage third parties all in the same place.
Okay, the next question: how typically are the sales and ATG observations retrieved from the sites?
Yeah, so we are connected into like 16 at this point different tank monitoring solutions. Obviously, our favorite is Titan, right? We have TrueFill had it. That's how we established a relationship with Titan, because we had shared customers and we had an integration built with Titan, and Titan does a phenomenal job at providing that service. But we're typically connected to a third party that's actually connected to the tanks, and then we extract the data from there. That being said, if we need to connect directly into the IP address of the tank, we can. But most of the time, companies have a service they're using that we connect to and pull in from, and then we can pull the inventory as quickly as the company that we're connected to can pull. So, for example, with Titan Cloud, there's a pull now function. As we integrate the two systems, there's pull now functionality where the dispatcher can go, show me inventory levels right now. I know that the tank levels show this, but that was 30 minutes ago. I want to know, what is it right now? And you can hit a button and it'll tell you exactly. I know Rich is on the call as well. Rich is also working with, as part of the integration, for the drivers to be able to hit pull now on the app, or the carriers to be able to pull now. So when they get to the terminal, they can do one last check of the site. Hey, tell me what's in the tank right now. I want to make sure it's going to fit. Just one last time, pull now, and instantaneously get the inventory levels to make sure that what they're going to pull is going to fit in the tank, and reduce the chance of a retain.
The next question is, for load lifecycle, if you do not have EBOLs, how do you know the BOL from the terminal? Are drivers having to upload into the system?
Great question. So if we're not using EBOLs, and full transparency, most of the work we do is not coming via EBOL. It would be great, but EBOLs are expensive, and you can get them from one place, as we all know. And if you're not using them, you're not using them, and that's okay. So the couple different ways. The driver, if it's your own truck, the driver has an app. Super easy, graceful app to use. The driver will punch in the BOL number and the net and the gross, and that's how we get the BOL. Plus, they take a picture of it. So we have the backup documentation. If there appears to be an error, then you have the actual image of the BOL, and you can look to see and make sure that what was entered in, what was punched in by the driver is accurate. Now, if we're getting EBOLs, it reduces what the driver has to do, because the driver doesn't need to punch in the information, because we're going to get it straight from DTN is typically who that comes from. However, that's not what most people do. The other way we can do it is if you're using third-party haulers, and maybe they're using their own dispatch system, not using our dispatch system. That's okay. There's an API that they can connect to where if they're capturing it in their system, then it will push that data into our system via API. If they aren't a big carrier or they're not willing to do that, you don't have the leverage to get them to do that, they will enter in the BOL information. Remember I was telling you we manage third-party haulers, so they can close out the loads in the system, and they don't even have to log in. It's a web-based. It's basically a web service that they have open up on their screen, and it tells them all the orders they have to do. They can confirm they got the order. They can confirm they delivered the order, and then they can punch in the BOL information. We get that back. They can also include an image, so you have the image to go along with it, and that'll come into the system just like if a driver input it into the app, or if we got the EBOL.
The next question is, how does integration look like for the carriers that currently do not have Titan?
We're agnostic. I say we as a Titan too is agnostic. So the carriers, they don't have to integrate it all if they don't want to, because what happens is when you're dispatching loads to a carrier, they're going to get an email, just like they would today, except nobody's typing it up, that sends them the information, what they're supposed to do. They click on the link. It opens up a screen for them that they can keep open all the time and just refresh it if they're getting lots of loads. And it'll give them line item out, item by item, load by load by load, what they're being asked to do by the customer. Now, if they're doing a large volume of loads, then they can connect to our APIs. And when some of those loads getting emailed and them looking at a web page, they can ingest it into their system if they have the capabilities to do that. They can also push the delivery details back into our system via API. Super easy to connect to. They have the delivery. Maybe they're using, like a lot of carriers use TMW. So I'll use TMW for example. Maybe they're using TMW. They've got all the information inside of TMW because they're capturing it as they go through their day. If it's in TMW and they connect to the API, they can push that information real time in us, and you would then have it. So there's a couple different ways, but there isn't a requirement that they have to integrate. There are ways to do it without being integrated. It's more efficient if they are integrated. It just depends on how much leverage you have over your carrier.
The next question is, all of our deliveries are split deliveries, two-way splits for E85s and three-way splits for R99s. Can this system match what sites to split with to be cost effective? Great question.
That is a good question. So split loads, absolutely. I mean, we do split loads. The system does split loads. Customers do split loads all day, every day. For forecasting, just to be clear, we have that on the road. Now, I'm careful to say this because you guys don't know us, but when I say something's on the roadmap, and Paul can attest to this, it actually gets done. Like there's a lot of other companies in the space that will, not Titan, obviously, but other companies in the space that will talk about a roadmap and then like 2 years later, it's still not done. So one of the next things we're doing to enhance forecasting is be able to forecast split loads. Right now, the system will forecast loads to a specific site, but it won't forecast same truck to sites. You can build the split loads in the system. That's fine. It's not a problem. It's very easy to do. The very next step of that, though, is yes, we will be able to say, hey, these sites are in geographic proximity, or the user can assign and say, I want these sites always delivered together. And then the system will automatically build that load to make sure that they're delivered at the same time. And that is active and something that we're working on right now. And just as reference point too, we push code on every 2-3 weeks at the longest. It doesn't cause a disruption to your business by any stretch of the imagination, because if we're doing like really full-blown functionality, we'll give everybody a heads up before. But we have an active roadmap. So a big part of the reason customers like to work with us is if you're a customer of ours, you have a voice in the roadmap. Like we were just on with a company today, and they're like, hey, like this, but if there's one certain thing that we do that nobody else does, and if you guys can do that, then we could let's further the conversation. And I get with Brandon and Paul and team, we talk about what the roadmap is, what the schedule is. Is that something else somebody else is asking for? When can we put it in? Came back to them with the date, said this one's going to be done. And when we say it's going to be that date, it is that date. And we include those things into as part of our, let's call it the customer forum. And that's how we continue to enhance the product. So if there's a specific way by which you would want us to do this, then we would love to talk to you about that so that we can include it in the design of the functionality.
Perfect. So I think we have time for one last question, and that is, how often do readings come in, example, every hour?
Some companies do every 15 minutes. It's completely up to the company that we're connected to, because we're not connected direct. Well, sometimes we are, but most of the time we're connected to a middle layer, somebody that's connected to the tanks that's given us the readings. If they can pull every 15 minutes, we will display it every 15 minutes. There's no limitations on our part. That being said, one of the things that's nice about Titan's Cloud solution for that is that you can actually pull now. So you can say, yeah, maybe the last reading was 30 minutes ago, and they set it up that way to do every 30 minutes. That's fine. But you can also do pull now. So the dispatcher can be looking at the site and go, I saw this was 25 minutes ago. I'm about to schedule. I want to make sure it's going to fit. Give me the live inventory reading like right now, and we'll ping the actual tank and give you the real time, the very real time inventory level based off of whenever they hit that button.
Very good. Thank you, Wade. You know what? These are outstanding questions. Thanks, everyone, for your fantastic participation. As you can see from this slide, if you've got more questions, which there was a lot of questions we didn't get to, please reach out to us through that email address or call us. We would very much like to work with you and answer any questions you have. Thanks very much.